this time I'll be reporting assessment of learning as our assigned topic. So here are the specific objectives. First, distinguish the purposes of assessment. Second, explain and analyze guiding principles of assessment. Discuss the importance, create and critique a table of specification. Differentiate supply type from select type test, and the last objective is to construct supply and select type of test. So these are the objectives to be met by the following reporters. My assigned topic is about determining the nature of assessment. So basically, I'll be reiterating some of the important points that we have tackled or discussed in our previous assessment subjects. We have assessment in learning 1, and currently we are studying assessment in learning 2. So first, anybody can share what is assessments for you? So what is assessment, by the way? So when we say assessment, it is something that we are going to gather information. We are going to test the learnings of our students. Okay, so that is assessment. So it is something that we need to check whether they've learned something from our discussion or from the activities. And then anybody who knows or remember this illustration, the three important factors, which are learning outcomes, assessment, and learning and teaching activities. So this is what we call constructive alignment. So as we all know, constructive alignment is the principle of constructive alignment simply means that the teaching, learning activity or the activities and assessment tasks are aligned to the intended learning outcome. So as the picture shown, you can see there that it is in a cyclical manner. The learning outcomes, the learning and teaching activities, and the assessment are in a cycle form, in which it means that these learning outcomes and the teaching activities or learning activities are aligned or fit to the assessment of learning. Okay, so the next we have assessment. So assessment, as we all know, it is a process by which information is obtained relative to some known objective or goal. Okay. Assessment also is a systematic gathering and analyzing of information to improve students' learning or programs of students' learning. And the last definition is assessment is a proper collection, interpretation, and use of information in regards to learning. As we all know in our previous learning subjects or assessment in learning subjects, we've discussed that through assessment, we can gather information or we can obtain relative information from our students, relative or aligned to their objective learning goal or outcomes. And then it is also a systematic gathering of or analyzing of information, since we can assess students' learning based on giving assessments. And it is a proper collection, since it is systematic. So it is a proper collection of gathering the data. Okay. And then note that assessment, all tests are assessments, but not all assessments are tests. I think we knew that already, that we can consider every test is assessment, but not all assessments are tests, because we have project assessment, we have performance assessment, etc. Okay. So why do we assess? So let me ask someone here, why do we assess? Okay, so we assess to know if the students can apply what they have learned in authentic situations. Okay, the most important thing or function of giving assessments is that we need to apply the students, or if the student can apply or demonstrate learnings in authentic situations through the given assessments or activities or projects can be. Okay, next, why do we assess? Because we wanted to improve. To improve what? The students' performance, the students' learnings, as well as to improve the teachers' teaching strategies. Then to inform, of course, to inform the students' performance, their progress in every step in their learning, to inform the parents to the progress of their children, and of course to inform the teachers themselves that this is now the growth, the process of their students when it comes to their learning. And the last one is to prove. So we assess because we need to prove something that based on what the discussion, based on the content, the subject area, the discipline, it is proven that through the given assessments, students have learnings or have learned something from the content subject. Okay. So actually, we have three types of assessment as we have learned in our PED subjects. The first one is assessment for learning. So it is diagnostic, ongoing, and formative. So assessment for learning, since we all know that all types of assessments are not are not in a form of test, but we can have oral assessment, we can have project performance assessment. So in assessment for learning, we can give or we can conduct question and answer portion. It is a form of assessment for learning. It is formative, ongoing, while the discussion is ongoing. Okay. Then the next one is we have assessment as learning. It involves self and peer assessment. Okay. This is probably um, having self-assessment or peer assessment by through the given like project assessments or group assessments, individual assessments. Assessment as learning. And then the last one is assessment of learning. Occurs at the end of the year or lesson. It is summative. So like for example, periodical tests, summative examinations, those are called assessment of learning, which are all part or given at the end of the lesson or year. You know, to sum up everything that students learned in the entire discussion. Okay, that is what we call assessment of learning. So another information here, assessment for learning enables teachers to use information about students' knowledge, understanding, and skills to inform their teaching. It also provides feedback to students about their learning and how to improve. Since through giving assessment for learning, we can assess, we can trace the students' progress along the lesson. So we can give feedback. You know, we can monitor. Yeah, that is the term. We can monitor the progress of the students when it comes to their learning. So that is the purpose of having assessment for learning. Another is for assessment as learning. So it involves students in the learning process where they monitor their own progress, ask questions, and practice skills. Also, students use self-assessment and teacher feedback to reflect on their learning, consolidate their understanding, and work towards learning goals. So since we all know that assessment as learning is more on self-reflection, self-assessment, and peer assessment, so it gives responsibility to the students to assess their own learnings, their own progress. So by having reflection, and of course by having a peer assessment, they can also give feedback. They can also give comprehensive input to their co-students, you know, as part of peer assessment. And then the last one, assessment of learning. It assists teachers to use evidence of student learning to assess student achievement against learning goals and standards. So given this assessment at the end of the lesson or at the end of the year, so it assists teachers to use evidence if whether their students have learned something or not, you know, if they have learned something. Okay, this is through given assessment of learning. So here, let us move on to my next subtopic, which is purposes of assessment. So why do we need to have assessment? So actually, we can sum up the purposes of assessment in three types of assessment. So what is the purpose of having assessment for learning? Firstly, because it monitors students learning in order to help teachers improve their teaching, students to improve their learning. Okay, so the one major purpose of assessment for learning is that it helps teachers to improve their teaching, because they can adjust through the given situation or circumstances whether their teaching strategies are fit, suitable for the students' learning, okay, or students' needs. Then the second is to improve students' learning, of course, because along the discussion, along the lesson, you can ask, you can assess, you can monitor the students' progress. So it somehow improve students' learning. The second purpose is it continuously informs instruction and helps students manage their own learning. Since it is ongoing, it is a process. So therefore, it informs a continuous instruction where it helps students manage their own learning. Okay. Then the last, the assessment of for learning, or it gives assessment information, is used to determine the next teaching steps and learning steps to continuously improve the teaching and learning process. Okay, it directs the teachers on how they are going to adjust the strategies, teaching strategies and methods in order to deal with the students' needs and students' expectations when it comes to assessment by having assessment for learning. We have the next. We have the examples, by the way. Examples of assessment for learning. Like we have interview. We can give homeworks as teachers. We can also observe, through given observations. We can also initiate questioning strategies and quizzes. We can give quizzes. So these are examples of assessment for learning, an ongoing assessment for students. So the next one, we have purposes of assessment as learning. So self-assessment or peer assessment. First is to help students to self-reflect, monitor their own learning, and adjust their learning strategies in order to achieve their goals and become more self-directed, metacognitive, independent, and successful learners. Okay, the purpose of having self-reflection as part of self-assessment is it gives us responsibility or accountability of our own learnings. Okay, so we need to be self-directed. We need to be independent when it comes to our own progress in academic or in school, so that because it is one way of testing our strengths and evaluating our weaknesses at the same time. So examples of assessment as learning, we have journals. Through journals, we can assess our development, and through self-assessment. Then peer assessment, as I mentioned. Then personal learning logs. So these are examples we can use by having or by giving assessment as learning. Then the next, we have purposes of assessment of learning. So the purpose is to measure what and how well the students have learned at the end of instruction. It certifies learning and measures students' overall achievement or proficiency. It determines whether learning goals and outcomes have been achieved. So this is the major purpose of having assessment of learning. To have a validation, to have certification that the students have learned from the entire instruction or at the end of the instruction or discussion of lessons. To entirely measure or assess the student's achievement or proficiency, the mastery of learning, by giving assessment of learning. Okay, then it is also one way of seeing whether the learning goals or the intended learning outcomes have been achieved by the students at the end of the lesson. Okay, then the next, we have the examples of assessment of learning. So we can give final performance tasks. It can be group tasks or group performance tasks or individual. And then we can give standardized tests like those, for example, in summative examinations. So we can give standardized tests from for example, for us education students. So the teachers can get a standardized test from the let examinations, okay, or examination I mean. Then periodical tests like summative tests, and then final papers or written outputs. So as part of final activity or final task for the students. Okay, so we have the other, aside from those some three purposes under the three types of assessment, we can, I've also searched other purposes of of having assessment. So first one is to inform and guide teaching and learning. So a good classroom assessment plan gathers evidence of student learning that informs teachers' instructional decisions. It provides teachers with information about what students know and can do. To plan effective instruction, teachers also need to know what the student misunderstands and where the misconceptions lie. Okay, seeing both sides of the students, the strengths and the weaknesses, their capability and the other side of it, okay, the negative one. So it somehow helps the teachers and the students to know what to inform and to adjust their strategy, both their strategies when it comes to teaching for the teachers and strategy in learning for the side of the students. So the next purpose is, by the way, as continuation, in addition to helping teachers formulate the next teaching steps, a good classroom assessment plan provides a roadmap for students. So students should at all times have access to the assessment so they can use it to inform and guide their learning. So it helps to inform or direct students and teachers. So another purpose is to help students set learning goals. So students need frequent opportunities to reflect on where their learning is at and what needs to be done to achieve their learning goals. So this is one way of assessing the students' learning progress or growth. If they achieve the goals, if they targeted the goals, the learning goals of the lesson or not. So when students are actively involved in assessing their own next learning steps and creating goals to accomplish them, they make major advances in directing their learning and what they understand about themselves as learners. So probably or certainly it is suitable for assessment as learning. Okay, as it is more on self-reflection or self-assessment. Another purpose, to assign report card grades. So teachers, so grades provide parents, employers, other schools, governments, post-secondary institutions, and others with summary information about student learning. So as we all know that through the given assessments, teachers, can gather data like grades, okay, can gather input or descriptive information from the students' learning progress. So it is to assign report card grades, to, to give remarks, to give grades to the students. Then the next purpose is to motivate students. So in research, Davis 2004 and Stiggins 2004 has shown that students will be motivated and confident learners when they experience progress and achievement, rather than the failure and defeat associated with being compared to more successful peers. Okay, so through the given assessments, the students can be motivated because they can also monitor their own progress by given those types of assessments. They can experience through different assessments like performance, projects, tests, etc. So by that, they are more active. Okay? They are indulging in the process of learning. So my next subtopic is to report or present and discuss the principles of assessment. As we all know, we have 8 principles of assessment. The first one, assessment should be based on intended learning outcome. As we all know, why it needs, like from the previous slide, I presented to you the constructive alignment that the teaching strategies or activities and the assessment are aligned to the learning or intended learning outcomes. Okay, so because that is the biggest purpose of having assessment. Okay, to see to it that the learning outcomes are attained or achieved at the end or along the process of the lesson or the giving of instruction or discussion. The next one, the second principle of assessment is assessment sets the level of performance. So that is why we have to have criteria for every assessment that we are going to give to our students, because it sets the level of performance, the standards, the norms to be followed, for to be for the students to be directed, to be guided on what they're going to do, on what should be achieved through this specific or certain assessment. So that is as teachers setting the level of performance or standards. It is not something nga maghatag lang ka without having criteria or rubrics for that assessment. The next or the third principle of assessment is assessment should be based on objectives, not on the content. Okay? Because the learning outcomes, we are actually targeting the learning outcomes. So that is why our assessments must be based on the objectives. Like, for example, the specific objectives of this report. So by having this flow of presentation or of our reports, try to assess whether we attained or we achieved the specific objectives for this report or not. So that is aligning or targeting the objectives of the lesson and not on the content. Because from the beginning of the lesson, the objectives are already presented. And these objectives are part as a whole of the content. Okay? So, dato gid siya mag-base, not on the content, but on the objectives of the lesson. So the fourth principle of assessment is assessment should come in varied ways. In what ways? We have performance tasks. You can give or employ performance assessment or assessments. Another one, through standardized tests or summative examinations, as I've mentioned lately. And then through oral examination or oral questioning. It can be in a format, it can be in a assessment for learning or formative manner, okay, along the discussion. Or we can have, or we can give project assessments as part of their final assessment. So in this way, in these ways, we can assess the multiple intelligences, the skills, the learnings of the students through given various or varied ways or types of assessments. Okay. The fifth principle is assessments should give comprehensive feedback. So basically feedback, we give responses, we give idea, we give opinion, advices, result, rating, comments, and etc. So that is a part, or that is one of the roles of the teachers by giving assessment, to give comprehensive feedback. So by how you can give comprehensive feedback, of course, by using your established criteria or rubrics. So for example, you already have this kind of rubric for that specific assessment. So by that, you can see to it that they failed to meet this criteria, they failed to meet this indicator. So that is the time after that, having by having monitoring of their assessment, then you can give comprehensive feedback that next time you need to do this, you need to adjust this one, you must have to clarify, to give effort on this one, like that. So that is giving comprehensive feedback. So giving comments and opinions to our students, performances or outputs. The sixth principle of assessment is we do assessment realistically, not in the out of context drills. As an important matter to be included or to be put in our minds. that when we give or when we implement assessment to our students, it must be in a realistic way, not in the out of context drills. So be real when it comes to giving assessments. Like try to adopt, try to simulate realistic activities or realistic situations where you can give to your students so that they can apply, they can demonstrate, show their skills and knowledge when it pertaining to that assessment. Okay, realistically. Then the seventh principle of assessment is teachers must aim for higher order thinking skills in assessment. So as we all know, we have the three based on the um, this presentation or illustration. We have three higher order thinking skills. We have analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Okay, so these are the target of having assessment in learning or of learning. I mean, so to attain these three levels. So why do we need to have to, or why is assessment must aim for higher order thinking skills and not on the lower part? Because we are targeting that the students can do more, can demonstrate more, can share, can show more based on what they have learned and based on the skills they have mastered from the lessons. Okay, so we have creating, evaluating, and analyzing. Okay, then the last principle of assessment is we emphasize on self-assessment. So basically, this is under the type of assessment as learning. So self-assessment, self-reflection, and peer assessment. So why assessment is emphasizes on self-assessment? Because as students, as learners, we need to have the sense of ownership, the sense of accountability and responsibility of assessing, monitoring, and evaluating our own progress when it comes to our learning. Okay, we do not just rely on the results, but of course, based on our self-evaluation, self-assessment, we can see that whether we are progressing or we are stagnant. Okay, so self-assessment, it boosts personal growth, exposure, and self-awareness. At the same time, it is student self-assessment. So we can have reflection. We can contemplate. Yes, we can contemplate towards our own progress in learning. So I think that's all for my report about the assessment of learning. So thank you for listening and for lending your time watching this video. Thank you.